everybody. Happy Wednesday. It is February something. What is it, Kelsey? February the 16th. So welcome everybody. We're just going to have a little time to chat here, and we have some questions that were submitted beforehand. So we'll get into it. But if you just pop in the chat where you're watching from, that would be awesome. It's always nice to see how far flung our viewers are. We've had fun. We've had a lot of folks stopping into our retail shop on their way through Louisville on vacation and popping in to say hello. So it's always fun to see everybody when they stop by. So should we just dive into it?
Yeah.
All right, we did get some questions that were sent in.
About the APQS stuff?
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. So, so if you have some questions that you want me to chat about, that you got some questions about long arm quilting, machine quilting, piecing, you can put them over there in the chat area. I did want to let you know, if you are in the market for a long arm machine, or you know someone who is in the market for a long arm machine, we do have a special going right now for the Millie 30, which is the biggest machine for APQS. So it's a 30-inch throat machine. It's a glorious machine, has great handles, can really cover a lot of real estate in one pass. And I've got it now for the special is it's got some freebies included to it. It's got a cash discount off of it. It's a really great price. So if you are interested, give us a ring here at Quilted Joy, and we can get you all your questions answered. And then I also wanted to let you know, if you are in the market for a computerized system for your APQS machine, if you have an APQS machine, and you're looking at a computer system for it, we do have a live event coming up that'll be a virtual test drive for the IntelliQuilter system on an APQS machine. Unfortunately, I don't sell IntelliQuilters or QuiltPaths. I don't sell any computerized system to anything other than APQS machines. Frankly, it's because that's the only machine I know backwards and forwards. I just don't have a way to learn other brands. The IntelliQuilter can go on other brands, great. I just don't have a way so that I can support other brands, that when you call me, I want to be able to tell you if the issue is an APQS issue or the issue is an IQ issue, and I simply don't have a way to learn that on other brands. So that's the only reason I don't sell IQs to other brands. It's as simple as that. So anyway, it's a 1 hour live Zoom. We'll talk about computerized system. We'll talk about the IQ on an APQS machine, and we'll kind of play around with it and get to know it a little bit. So if you're interested in computerized systems for your APQS machine, go on and sign up. It's really specifically meant for folks who are in the market. So if you already have one and you're thinking this would be a great way to learn something new, you're probably not going to learn something new. We're really going to look at like how it attaches and how to turn it on, stuff like that that you probably already know. So go ahead and sign up if you're in the market, and we will chat about computers. Were those the only two little announcements that we wanted? Okay, great. All right, and then we did have a couple of questions that came through before we started, and one of them was about the recent edition of Love of Quilting magazine included this quilt. Can you see it okay? Mm-hmm. This is my Louisville Spirit quilt that I made for kiddos' graduations. And so it's a string quilt, and I don't know if you've ever done a string quilt before, but essentially you use some kind of foundation and you sew your strips to that foundation, and then you trim that to size, and those are your blocks. All right, and so this one says, it doesn't say who asked this question. Okay, I'm not sure who asked this question, so if it was you, put it in the chat. But it says, I just received my March-April Love of Quilting about the Louisville Spirit string piecing quilt. Everyone talks about using a foundation, like muslin, paper, phone book pages, etc. Why can't this just be done? Yeah, you can absolutely do that. Squaring up needs to happen anyway. Yep. And from what I've heard, the paper for sure loses its 10-inch size anyway. Can you clarify the best way to go about this quilt? It's on my bucket list. Well, I'm glad it's on your bucket list. Yeah, I have done string quilts using muslin. I've done them using phone book paper and exam paper. I've done them in a lot of different ways. So it really doesn't matter, whatever works for you. The only reason that I used a fusible batting as my foundation to fuse the strips down to sew the strip set was simply so that I didn't have to quilt it as densely. It was like a quilt as you go kind of way to do a string piece. And so I just thought, well, heck, I'll just use the batting, and then I won't have to layer the quilt and do all that other stuff. So really for me, it was a way to kind of play and kind of bring that whole quilt as you go method into string piecing. But you use whatever you want. I mean, and maybe over in the chat, you guys, if there's like something you like to use when you string piece, pop that over there in the chat. But there's lots of ways, lots of things you can use. Yeah, that thing called the phone book that we all used to get on our front porch was certainly a popular one for a long time. And so then Chris says, can you describe how you thread Millie when using micro quilter? I tried it once and had so much thread breakage. I changed back to so fine thread. I use bottom line super bobs in the bobbin. Any help is appreciated. So Chris, so micro quilter is 100 weight thread. So it's very skinny and it's going to be a little more finicky, but you can have balanced tension on the high side. You can have balanced tension on the low side. You just need to make sure the same amount of tension on your bobbin is the same amount of tension on your top so that that thread handshake happens in the batting layer. So what I would recommend is that you aim for balanced tension on the low side. So I would have you lower your tension on your bobbin a little bit. And then I think it'll be easier for you to balance out that skinnier thread on the top. And then don't forget, if you are using, it doesn't say here, if you're using, hey Diane waved, hey Diane. Oh, that's so sweet, Diane, that your videos have taught me how to quilt. Oh, that's sweet, Diane, thank you for that. So Chris, it doesn't say if you have an APQS machine, but if you, oh, she does, a Millie? Oh yeah, it has a Millie. Okay, sorry, Chris, yeah. So Chris, just before your tension knob on your Millie is a 3-hole guide. And your thread can go through that 3-hole guide a number of ways. The only rule is we want you using the bottom hole, but the other 2 holes you can go through in alternate ways. So I would have you thread it, your micro quilter thread, the way that I thread cotton thread, because cotton is finicky. So instead of entering from the back on the top hole, entering from the back on the middle hole, entering from the back on the bottom hole, so that barber pole kind of path, I would instead have you do it more like a running stitch through those 3 holes. So enter from the back on the top hole, enter from the front on the middle hole, enter from the back on the bottom hole. So your thread is running through those instead of twisting or turning through those. Try that, lower your tension down, and then I would have you use a skinnier needle, like a 16 needle, not an 18 needle, because it's a super skinny thread. But I really love using that 100 weight thread, especially for Stitch in the Ditch and especially for going around applique.
What bobbin do you use with micro quilter?
What bobbin do I use for micro quilter? I am really loving Deco bobbins, the pre-wound plastic sided 80 weight bobbin in like a canvasy or a gray color. We're using that a lot with our renters too here. That, or you could go with a 60 weight bobbin like you're using. That's perfectly fine in the bobbin. You could also wind your own if you wanted to, but I don't know, I'm lazy, I guess. I just use those 80 weight Deco bobs, so yeah. Love the quilt behind you. Thank you. What is behind me? Oh, yeah. This one is Cynthiana, and it was a celebration of all different kinds of flying geese. And the one that's interesting to me is a split goose. So let me see if I can find it. Well, I guess it's on the outside border. Can you see this? Mm-hmm. So on the outside border, the goose itself is right here. So you'll notice so generally the goose is that pointy part and the sky is the side triangles. So if you take a look, the sky is actually split. The sky has 2 colors in the sky. So the goose is one color and the sky is 2 colors. And then there's a goose over here where the goose is the same color as part of the sky, and that makes it elongate out. So it's just flying geese and the ways that you can position colors in flying geese to give yourself kind of illusions and stuff. So hopefully that was helpful. And Chris, I would have you, you were talking about micro quilter, you posted there inside the Quilted Joy Clubhouse. You might post some photos of your thread path and we can all kind of take a look and see your thread path and see how things are going for you and if there's anything that jumps out to us. I know I had somebody send me a photo of they posted it and I saw a picture of their thread path, and they actually had the thread They didn't notice that it was being wrapped around the post that comes out of the top of the thread collar. And so it was a short cone, and then the thread, as it exited, was getting wrapped around the post in the back before it was headed up. And so I just had her put like a little stand underneath it to raise up the height of that cone, even another cone upside down underneath the cone, and that will just get it so that when it comes off the top, it doesn't wrap around that post on the back of your machine. So, you know, there's lots of ways to thread a long arm machine. You just got to kind of figure out the way that you like best. Linda says, when you use the 100-weight thread for stitch in the ditch, do you stitch in the ditch all the way down and then roll back up to do the other stitching in the blocks? Do you change threads then and also change the bobbin? Linda, I do not like ditch the whole quilt and then roll it back and start with the actual motifs. There's a lot of danger in there as far as like trapping fullness and creating pleats and puckers. If you think about a magazine, and when you roll a magazine up and how that splays out, the same thing's happening with your quilt. So I wouldn't do that. I would just do what I can reach between my bars. I would stitch in the ditch what I can reach between my bars, and then I would switch out my threads and do the motifs, and then just roll forward and do what's between my bars. Now we're talking about, you know, custom. It's going to take a while, right? It's going to take a while. So. All right, we got another question in here. It looks like it's highlighted, so I can't. Is there a guide you'd recommend for what size long arm needle to use for which thread? Bonus question. Oh, there's a bonus question. All right. What needle would you recommend for glide? I normally use So Fine, but I'm trying the glide that came with my 2020 Millie for the first time today. So the size of your long arm needle is directly related to the size thread you're running. So you're exactly right there. So the size of the thread that you're running, like a 40-weight glide, is perfect for an 18 needle. And really the only two sizes I'd want you going back and forth on would be a 16 needle or an 18 needle. 19 is a pretty honkin' big needle, and 14 is just the chances of you breaking it are too high because it's such a skinny piece of wire they make it out of. So I would have you stick with a 16 or an 18. Now I will say that when I have my glide thread, and I will try to get away with a 16 needle if I can. Some of the glide threads that are deep colors, so rich purple, rich blue, black, there's more dye on it, and I won't be able to get away with a skinny needle. I won't be able to get away with running a 16 needle. I'll have to use an 18 needle. And the way I know I'm not going to get away with it is I start to have a lot of shredding. Like it'll break eventually, but I have a lot of shredding, and so I'll go up in needle size, and that will help with the glide. And you said you've been using So Fine. I would have you also get a Try-Me cone, get a small cone of Primo Soft. So Primo Soft is the sister thread to glide. It's a matte finish thread, and we've been using it here with our runners, and it runs beautifully. It's a direct competitor to So Fine. It is a little lintier, I will say that. It's a little lintier. But try it. If you like glide, you'll love Primo Soft. Both of those are great. And then I would say for that for the 100-weight thread that we were just talking about, I would definitely go with a 16 needle, right, for sure. And so let's see, normally glide, and then that for the first time, you're going to use your 2020 Millie for the first time today. That's exciting. So I would have you, when you get that Primo Soft to try as well, it's a 50 weight. So again, I would go down to that 16 needle and see what you think about that 16 needle. All right. Well, you guys, we're going to have a pretty quick little Ask Me Anything here today. So I appreciate you all joining me. And if there aren't any other questions, we are going to meet again on the first Wednesday of the month in March. And now I'm not going to be able to pull that date right out of my head. So let me look up and see when that is. And we'll be doing our regular clubhouse meeting at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And that is on Wednesday, March the 2nd. And we are going to talk about Stitch in the Ditch in that episode. So make sure you watch it because we're going to talk about ways to attack it and ways to think about it. So let me make sure we didn't have any other questions that came through. There was one other question.
There's one from Diane, and she's asking, do your kids still quilt?
Diane, do my kids still quilt? You know, Diane, they kind of is probably the question to say. So Diane, my daughter is in medical school, and she works in a lab with rats. So do stitching up rats, does that count as quilting? Because her professors and her teammates in her lab tell her that she has beautiful stitches on those rats. so she kind of sort of quilts still. She did send me a picture of a pattern that she wants to get. I've forgotten the name of it. It's a beautiful modern quilt that she wants to buy the pattern, and she wants to look at fabric and all that. So she's jazzed about it. And she has her sewing machine that she uses to hem her pants and all that stuff. So the sewing bug is there, but yeah, right now she's pretty much stitching on rats is about it. And then my son Luke actually works here now. He is our accountant, bookkeeper, controller. So he just made a t-shirt quilt for his girlfriend. So he does still quilt. And that was her graduation gift. He just gave her that in December. And then Nicholas, he is down at Georgia Tech and getting his master's in biomedical engineering. And he's not sewing at all. He's chasing Frisbees. He's in a lab looking at stem cells. There's no rat stitching going on, but it's in his brain, so it'll come out again later. So, Alyssa, when you're using the ruler and doing custom, do you take your ruler base off in between? It kind of depends on how much I'm using that ruler. I would say if I'm going back and forth between free motion and ruler, which is typically what I do, I'll just keep it on the whole time. But if I'm only using a ruler for a little tiny bit and then not for the rest, I'll pop it off because I don't want it adding weight. Sometimes on the Lucy or the Lenny, if you have an APQS machine on a standard table, if you find that the ruler base bumps into the belly bar as you pull the machine towards you, it's an easy adjustment to fix that. But I do have some folks who are like, I just pop it off because I don't want to take the chance of it hitting something. If you feel like your ruler base is hitting something, there's an adjustment that needs to be made to your table because it really shouldn't be doing that. And by the way, the adjustment, if you have a standard table, APQS is what we're talking. There are these two brackets, these two arms that come off the legs of the table, and there are two bolts that hold those brackets on. And if you loosen those and kind of lift up on the bracket and then retighten it, it'll lift that belly bar up just a touch, and that'll give it clearance for your ruler base to fly by. Melissa, I ordered the scoop foot, and when I placed it on the machine, it's too low. I understand how to raise the foot, but I will need to do this every time I stitch between the feet. So Melissa, I'm not sure what year your machine is, but if your machine is a 2019 or newer, so 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, then you shouldn't need to be raising and lowering your foot. If you have an older APQS machine, so 2018 or older, then you may need to do a slight adjustment to that scoop foot because the way the feet that were made for those generations machines were individually crafted by hand, and so there's slight variations, as you have found. So if that's your age machine, yeah, you will need to. Now I will say that you can go up to like 2 business cards between your foot and your plate. So the way that you judge that is you don't do needle down, you actually use the flywheel and you go until the needle is in the fully down position, which is a little bit further than the needle down position. So you have to use the flywheel to do it. And when your needle's in the fully down position, take a business card and slide it under your foot. You can get away with up to 2 under there, but I would prefer that you keep it to 1 business card. But if you have those older machines, you may have to tweak the height of that hopping foot because each of them is made by a human, and so each of them has a little difference. The newer machines, so 19 and newer, those feet you shouldn't need to do that. What's that?
She has a new Millie.
You have a new Millie. So Melissa, then I would want you to call service, APQS service, and talk to them about that because you really shouldn't need to have to change your foot all the time. The other thing is I'd want you to make sure that you have that foot as high up as you can possibly go to make sure that you've got it positioned correctly on your hopping foot stem. I don't know what I'm sure there's a word for it that's in my brain, but it's not coming up currently. So Melissa, give APQS service a call. Or you can send them an email, service@apqs.com, and give them a picture or a video or something, and they'll help you out that way. So, were there any other questions that came through, Rachel?
No.
All right, you guys, thank you so much. We'll see you in a couple weeks at the March Clubhouse meeting. All right, bye.